Alright, what's going on, guys? So, the reveal of Elden Ring Nightreign happened about 2 weeks ago, and during that reveal, there was a deluge of information from the trailer itself, official publications on the website, interviews by the game director, as well as testimonials from people that actually got to get hands-on with the game. And so by now, you likely know that Elden Ring Nightreign is not a typical Souls-like game. It's a co-op survival game built off the foundation of roguelikes with some extraction elements, and you probably know that it's hero-based as well as taking place on a different timeline than the base game of Elden Ring lore-wise. So you're likely caught up on the basics, especially if you watch this channel. But since there was so much information, there was likely a lot of things you missed. So today I want to go over a lot of interesting details that have kind of flown under the radar that you will definitely want to know in preparation for the game actually releasing. But as we get started today, if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring Nightreign, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. Starting off today, I'm sure you all are well aware that one of the special features of Elden Ring Nightreign is the return of some notorious bosses from the Dark Souls trilogy, as we saw with the Centipede Demon and the Nameless King in the trailer, as well as the Duke's Dear Freya from Dark Souls 2 in a picture on the website. But one thing that a lot of people haven't considered is that in addition to bosses, we may be seeing the return of some notorious enemies from the trilogy as well. Take a look at this image here. From the game's Steam page, we can see 2 players down in a dungeon with some approaching beastmen about to loot these chests. But these are not your average Elden Ring chests. The design of these chests is actually that of the Dark Souls trilogy chests. But in the base game of Elden Ring, there was only one with this design. Now the reason this is significant is because in the Dark Souls trilogy, there was an enemy known as a Mimic, which was disguised as a normal chest but would eat the player if they tried to open it. Now Mimics were noticeably absent from the base game of Elden Ring, but I think there's a pretty good chance they can make a return in Nightreign, and based off the design of these chests in this image, it looks like that's a strong possibility. Now just in case we see these guys make a return, here is how to tell a Mimic apart from a normal chest. If the chain on the right side of the chest is facing back, it's a normal chest, but if it's facing the front, it is a Mimic. Unfortunately, we can't see the chains in the image, and I don't believe anybody that actually played the game mentioned them at all, so it'll probably just be safer to hit every chest you come across, just in case they actually do. But moving on, the next thing I want to talk about is actually not to do with gameplay, but rather the soundtrack of Elden Ring Nightreign, because it was recently announced that the soundtrack will be done by Kota Hoshino, who was the main director of the Armored Core 6 soundtrack, and that one was amazing. Shoei Miyazawa will also be working on it, who did much of the base game soundtrack, as well as Armored Core 6 alongside Kota Hoshino, so I think we're in for some absolute bangers on this one. It was kind of a question of where the soundtrack was going to go after the news broke that Yuka Kitamura would be leaving Fromsoftware, so it'll be cool to see the direction the sound goes, with Kota Hoshino taking on this new direction of sound than what we saw with Armored Core, and I'm excited to hear it. But up next, I want to talk about a small detail we got from the interview, where it was confirmed that Nightreign will have a total of 8 main bosses to take down. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first read that, that seemed like an incredibly small number, but we need to actually talk about the structure of the game in order for that number to make more sense. Now, as we've been told from people that got hands-on with the game, the way Nightreign actually works is that you will select the main boss you want to fight at the end of your 3-night survival, and you will select one from that list of 8. However, during the night leading up to your encounter with the main boss, you will fight smaller bosses. So, for example, it's been confirmed that one of the main bosses you will fight is Morgott. Yes, once again, believe it or not. And in the nights leading up to that main fight, you will fight Draconic Tree Sentinel bosses. Now we actually have seen another major boss, that being this 3-dog boss called Gladius. Now what you'll notice about this fight is that it takes place in a rendition of Radahn's arena, with this sort of epic sunset going on. It's not actually in the lootable area of Limgrave, but in its own arena. Now if we look at the fight with the Nameless King or the Centipede Demon, those don't appear to be in unique arenas. They look like they're still in the Limgrave area. So we can assume that those will not be major bosses, but instead some end of day boss fights, not taking up one of those 8 spots. But also on the Steam page, we can see this picture of what is almost definitely a main boss, because of again that sandy Radahn style arena that we see. So out of what we know so far, we only know of 3 of the 8, assuming we're correct in our analysis here. So while that may seem like a small number, in context of the full game, it's really not. So I've seen a lot of people getting discouraged at that number, but don't worry, it seems like we're still going to have plenty of content. Now, one thing that is a little bit discouraging is that while we know that the game will be 3 players and can also be played solo, unfortunately Nightreign game cannot be played with 2-player co-op. It seems like the game is only balanced for 1 or 3 players, and although this was never explicitly stated by the director, this was something that was kind of unspoken and confirmed by the people that got to play it. It will also be working off the same framework of multiplayer as the base game of Elden Ring, which means no cross-play. There will be cross-generation play, which means, for example, you can play with PS4 players on a PS5, but you cannot play with Xbox players on a PlayStation. The game's coming out in 2025. I don't know why Fromsoftware still has not implemented crossplay, but that's the way it's going to be, unfortunately. And I know some people had some questions about that, but it was another thing that got lost in the big news. But moving on from that as well, with all the excitement about bosses returning from Dark Souls, one game that kind of got pushed to the wayside and forgotten about was Sekiro. And while we haven't seen any bosses returning from this game, we have seen a lot of gameplay features from Sekiro show up in the trailer. We talked in our trailer breakdown about this clip here, with this hero performing Sekiro deflex and a special follow-up attack, but the hero that actually seems to draw the most from Sekiro is Wilder, the winged helm hero, who uses a great sword and a buckler shield, but the Sekiro aspects appear in his little crossbow he has mounted on his arm, because we see this crossbow do several of the abilities of Sekiro's prosthesis. Right here we see him use the flame vent, which seems to work almost exactly as it did in Sekiro, and I am very happy to see that make a return. We also see here shortly after, Wilder use the crossbow as a grappling hook to snatch this soldier and bring him toward him, which is of course the base ability of Sekiro's prosthesis. We also see shortly after Wilder perform a wall jump, an ability too which has been up to this point unique to Sekiro. I'm sure we'll see more Sekiro abilities scattered throughout the other heroes, but so far those are the ones we could see in the trailer. Now the final detail that I think a lot of people might have missed is in this shot here, with who admittedly many of us thought was the Firekeeper from Dark Souls 3. In this shot we see Wilder with this other character in the round table hold, but if we look closely, this is not the Dark Souls 3 Firekeeper, but instead the hero Duchess. If we look closely in this shot here, we can see that she has that exact same mask, with the same hair falling on the left side of her face, and it is pretty obvious when we compare the two. But when we look at these cutscenes, it does seem like there's going to be a story involved between all the heroes, more so than them just being selectable characters to load into the level with. And I really hope that's the case, because it'll take this game from being something you just play for fun on an afternoon to something that can stick with you for a while and make the gameplay more impactful. But those are some details that I think a lot of people missed in the initial Elden Ring Nightreign trailer and a lot of the information that came out alongside it. You might have known some of these, you might have not known some of these, but if you have other things that we did not cover, be sure to leave them down in the comments section below. Let me know if you want more videos diving into these details that people might have missed. But of course, if there is more information about Elden Ring Nightreign that comes out, I will be keeping you up to date right here on the channel, so make sure you subscribe. With all that though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it, and I will catch you in the next one.